I mentioned earlier, John McCain was a great friend of Georgia, and unfortunately we lost him 2 weeks ago. We have another great friend of Georgia who is here today, and that is the Foreign Minister of Lithuania, Linas Linkevičius. And so Linas, please come to the stage, and David Kramer, my colleague, formerly of the McCain Institute, now with Florida International University, will be moderating the conversation with the Foreign Minister. Probably no one has a clearer perspective on the challenges faced from his perspective in the Baltic states, understanding what's happening in Georgia. So over to you.
Kurt, thanks very much. There we are. Thanks very much, Kurt. It's great to be back here. I'm sorry I missed last year's conference due to a hurricane in Miami, and apparently I'm going back to a hurricane on Thursday. So wish us all who are flying back to the U.S. luck in getting home. It's a great privilege for me to be back here with Linas. We were together 4 years ago out in the courtyard. Open space, and we were both sweating like crazy. So it's nice to be inside today.
And to sweat inside.
To sweat inside today, exactly. So we're going to jump right into a conversation, then we'll turn to the audience for some questions. And what I'd like to start with, Linas, if you don't mind, I'm going to quote from Senator McCain's last book, The Restless Wave, which I strongly recommend. It's a great read, and it really encapsulates Senator McCain's views on many, many subjects, including on Mr. Putin, one of his favorite targets in the book. Senator McCain writes, Russia's future is bleak, darkened by all the ills he and his collaborators have created for their country and blamed on the United States. Putin is uniquely vulnerable, and yet, from the Donbass to Syria to an American presidential election, he is on the attack. Because he has not encountered the resolve it will take to expose his precarious position, to shatter his ambitions, until he does meet that resolve, there's no end to the trouble he'll cause and the victims he'll claim. Mr. Minister, let me ask you to reflect on Senator McCain's analysis of Mr. Putin.
First, good to be back. Good to be back, and I'm really very happy to see familiar faces. On this saying, of course you are vulnerable if you're doing something wrong. It's applicable to everyone. But I'd like to say on Senator McCain's legacy that we are really now encouraged, I would say, by these thoughts, by his minds, and his ability to name names, to call things as they are. And I believe the feature of this conference, because, you know, it turned out that after the loss, we're thinking once again, what will happen without this man, what we will say, how we will assess situations accordingly. Are we able to do the same way as it was before? Probably it's not possible to do as it was before, but we will all think what he would say if something will happen, what we would act. And he was never shying away to name names and to say bluntly in plain speech how facts are. And this is maybe his legacy and also our duty, and special duty of this conference. It happens that the feature of these conferences will be under McCain name, McCain Institute. And this is not just duty, obligation, but also privilege. So keep moving along these lines, and we'll be very, very happy if we'll be able to assist.
And what do you make of his analysis that Putin will remain a threat to the West as long as he does not encounter pushback from the West?
If this team now in Kremlin will not realize that they're going to the stalemate situation, also leading their own country, first of all, economically and by other means, that will be danger to everyone, because it means instability. It means also for all of us challenges. They should be also somehow reflected in our financial resources, in our ability to withstand, and this is definitely not for better. And frankly, if somebody think that, well, patriotism or feeling that you are superpower means something, but you should think what that means in reality, you know. I'm always saying Russia is not superpower. Today Russia is super problem. And we have to address exactly as it is. And no more. Of course, waste resources, time, energy and to find clue how to address the issue. But the main attitude would be to be consistent and not to give up, not to do anything at the expense of values, principles, and commitments. There's always temptation to retreat, to be flexible. There were a lot of, efforts and attempts to do that in the past. These years we are celebrating some jubilees, right? Sad, like 10 years of war in Georgia, right? And 20% of territory occupied and nobody trying to review even this policy. 50 years events in Prague. The same tanks, by the way, the same narrative, different timing. There were more lessons not learned. And I'm always saying now when we are in early September, back to school. So it's good to talk not about school, not only about political season, but also about lessons which were not learned. There are plenty of examples through the history. Recent history, long history. So it has to do with that. So I believe we have to be consistent. We have to find the way how to preserve Euro-Atlantic unity. It's also very important because also test case. Are we able to understand that we are powerful when we are together, when we are finding some common ground, regardless everything what's happening, regardless some statements or some other factors, but nevertheless, I hope we will find power inside to preserve what was created through decades and made us really strong.
If I did social media, I would definitely tweet out, Russia is not a superpower, but a super problem. That was a great line.
Edward doing that?
I think Edward is doing that as we speak, so thank you, Edward. Linus, let me ask you about Lithuania as a member of NATO has Article 5 security guarantees, but do you still stay awake at night worrying what Mr. Putin might do to your country specifically, or try to test NATO, maybe not necessarily in Lithuania, but your neighbor Latvia or somewhere else?
Madness usually have no limits, but I believe it would be too far to challenge NATO, for instance. I believe it would be too much, and we shouldn't be. We should be realistic. So we nationally are more secure because we're members of NATO, we're members of European Union, and we are not fresh. It's incredible already, so to say, 14 years after we joined. Really, so big period of time. But it doesn't mean that we do not share your concerns or concerns of Ukraine. It doesn't mean at all, by far, because we know it was recently. We also know the price. We know not from the books. You can sit down in comfortable corner and to contemplate about many things. But if you went through that yourself personally, it's completely different. And maybe this is the difference comparing to those who are theoretically thinking about some resets, for instance. And when it was reset initiative launched, some of us were critical, you remember. On the other hand, we said, let's try. Okay, everybody tries, let's try, because it's always good that you have a try. But I was saying at that time, I remember using this IT terminology. When you're pushing reset button, it's always temptation to push delete button at the same time. And let's start from the scratch, from the empty, so to say, place. No commitments, no crimes, nothing wrong was done. Let's start from the beginning. Then will be the same again, frankly, because history shows. But it was illusion. So this is also called like resilience, if I may say so, which is now more and more popular to discuss what that means, what is the meaning, is it counter-propaganda or it's something else? And I remember when we started discussing in our European midst these issues, and when we started to convince each other and also to start some strategic communication, so to say, activity, the first reaction by some colleagues was, are we going to do European propaganda? Are we going, to do censorship? To prevent free media, and it took some time when we tried to explain, no, we're not going to do propaganda. We're not going to prevent or to censor. Of course not. Freedom of speech, one of the best achievements. But at that time, we all said, there's no freedom to lie, If you're deliberately lying, it's not another point of view, as sometimes our friends used to say. We are saying because it's another point of view. And you disagree. Said, okay, but if you're deliberately lying, I remember we discussed with Russia Today channel people in one of the conferences. They also say, look, we have our view, we have rights to say, and you're stopping us, it's not democracy. And I said the same, look, but you know that your soldiers are on Ukrainian soil. You know that. But every day you are saying otherwise during your programs. You deliberately saying not true. How you can call it professional? How you can call it, everything has and by the way, it was not very comfortable for them to feel. I believe in this room nobody, but if would be somebody would be interesting to discuss. Because it's also the kind of resilience. But if you want to be resilient, you have to be informed. This is also the weapon. Not to propaganda, but people should be informed. If you're not informed before decisions are made, it's a very big danger for the governments as well, but for so to say, even so to say some, future of the countries. I don't know, maybe nobody here from UK, but not so very popular to talk about Brexit, for instance. And I have my own opinion, with all respect to British people. I deeply think it was a mistake, because people who voted, they were not informed. Very, very soon they realized that, look, they didn't know that they will leave single market, that they will leave customs union, that they didn't know that will be some big consequences. But on the other side, what's surprising me, but we have to respect voice of people. If you're respecting, inform them before they're taking decision. Okay, we're not talking now about Brexit, but in general terms, informed people are more resilient. Informed people are more equipped to recognize. And this is the only way to go. So that's really, the recipe very simple. And I'm going far away from your question, you noticed that yet? It's deliberately.
I'm used to it, yes. Yeah. When we were here 4 years ago, we talked about the Bucharest communique. NATO and Ukraine will become members of NATO. 4 years later to today, we have a Europe that is even more consumed with its own problems, challenges from immigration to ultranationalism and other issues. You have a United States that has raised a lot of questions. To the Georgians in the audience here, give them an honest assessment of Bucharest communique in 2018, how it looks. Is there light at the end of the tunnel that they will become members?
2008, you mean?
From 2008 to today, is there light at the end of the tunnel for NATO membership?
As one can get the light of approaching train, in the tunnel. No, it is. And they're making quite well, Georgians. They're doing that not only in making statements, but also sharing risks, sending troops to Afghanistan, for instance, the largest per capita contribution. People are dying, sacrificed, so this is just not a statement, this is really real fate. And even given the tense internal nature of Georgian politics, they are really not very friendly, as you know. But on security, on defense, on these focal issues, they are united, and this is also very impressive. It should be sold out, outside the world. And also, as I said at the beginning, during this 2008 summit, I was also present, and initially it was perceived as a failure, if you remember. Georgians were very upset. They said, look, we're not given map. I said, look at the text. It says that you will be members of NATO. It's promise of future membership. You're candidates to NATO membership because it's done. Heads of states made decision, which was not easy, believe me. It was also about Ukraine at that time, Georgia and Ukraine, full stop. I remember there were some slow voices during the drafting exercise. Let's add if they wish so. No additions, they will be members. Maybe that advice was also smart. If they will not wish so, of course they will not be members. But that was really a big fight, geopolitical fight, I would say, and there were two camps. Some of them, us in particular, we said, look, we have to give a signal. We have to say that it matters what's going on in Georgia and Ukraine, and their decision is important. Let them help at least, and give them a map. And others said, no, it will be provocative. And this is a clash of two types of philosophy in general. There are some people who say that let's not do something because it's provocative. Let's not state something because it could be provocative. I would say it's provocative if you're not doing something if you must do. If you're not stating something, naming names, for instance, as Senator McCain often did, this is provocative because it allows others to continue with the unhelpful policies, you know. It really encourages, and, you know, more to say. It's not comfortable to hear, but I would even dare to say that, of course, we are not guilty. We cannot, so to say, accuse ourselves for occupation of 20% of Georgia's territory or annexation of Crimea. Of course, we cannot do that, but we should share responsibility because we were able to react in different way. We didn't do that. Maybe not full responsibility, but part of that. And this is the same now. Again, voices to retreat, you know, to be flexible, to be diplomatic, whatever you can call. And this is detrimental, provocative in the future. Very important to realize. And this is nothing aggressive here, just consistency. If we respect our values, it's not just empty statement, we have to understand the meaning and price. Again, Senator McCain knew what means freedom. Being captured and spent more than 5 years in the custody, he knew what that means, freedom. It was not just, you know, something. It was really had a price, and he knew what means fight for freedom. The same as Georgians know, or Ukrainians now starting to understand and realize, and we still remember. So it makes us stronger. At the same time, really, situation is quite challenging, and I really cannot predict that it will be easier, maybe even more difficult, and will be tested again for transatlantic unity, will be tested for European unity. All these tests are just coming, and we have to meet them adequately.
Let me ask one or two more questions, and then we'll go to the audience. When you look at both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, there are a lot of questions and concerns about developments in the United States, developments in a number of European countries. Is a foreign minister of a small but very important country that has really shown leadership on values, on principles, on freedom, democracy, human rights, how do you view the transatlantic relationship these days?
No one is unimportant if you're acting publicly, if you're saying something publicly, regardless size of your country. And my rule is you really should be realistic, and we do understand that because of Lithuania's decision on something, probably we will not change a game. Maybe we will not change dramatically the course which is prevailing, right? But by wrong decisions, we can spoil it. It's like watch, like clock. You know, do not need many details. All should be precise and very much to the point. Even small details, if they are wrong, can spoil the mechanism. So this is how it works. So we shouldn't be, as I said, too naive that we will be decisive, but on the other hand, will be very big mistake thinking that we mean nothing. That's my rule, and I believe this is really exactly how we should face this story. And coming back to your point on transatlantic, I already said, I will repeat. I'm a believer of transatlantic unity, of strength, of these values which were created. In my view, maybe those who were present during this event in DC in the cathedral, when we paid tribute to Senator McCain, I felt that this was not just paying tribute to the senator, or the big man statesman, but also kind of all people gathered to remind each other that values mean something. Values which were put aside for the while by somebody. Values is not just material, they're also something that has to do with our, so to say, foundation on which we're building our organizations, our relationship. This is really, it turned out that it was very symbolic through Senator McCain. For me, it was really big impression when, relevant politicians from both political parties came to pay tribute and showed this unity behind values, which are important for everyone and for us as well. I'm optimistic in the way that we really will win. We'll win, but it will be not easy. And I'm not talking only about defense, security. I'm talking, time will come, we will come back, I believe, to the trade issues. I was among those who were very sad when TTIP was put aside. I believe it would be good. It would be really good if the European Union and United States will come up with the initiatives and the foreign trade policy We even can take initiative to review world trade rules in the future. We really can do a lot of things, and we'll not just add to the GDP on both sides of the ocean, but really could add value to that. Also other issues. I believe if we will be together, we'll be very strong and very important player. If we'll be split, the challenges we are facing now will be even more dangerous.
And as I turn to the audience to recognize anyone who wants to ask a question, let me also just pay tribute to you, Linus, your ministry, your government, your country, and your fellow citizens. Not only do you talk about values and human rights, but you actually take actions in providing shelter to people from the region who need to flee their own countries because of repression and threats, harassment and attacks. And Lithuania has really done a heroic job in providing safe haven for many, many people. So my thanks to you and your country for doing that. Are there any questions from the audience? We have time for maybe one or two questions. Right there, yeah, General. Here, come right here. Oh, you got it?
Minister, very pleased that you're here today. Belarus is an area that I certainly know almost nothing about, yet it's the eastern half of what we refer to as the Suwalki Corridor. And Lithuania, Poland have both done a lot to improve security. How do we protect the Suwalki Corridor? You know, SIPA, my organization, did a big study on this. But the missing part is how will Belarus react? Would Belarus either tacitly or actively support a Russian effort to disrupt the Suwalki Corridor, or would they resist something like that? And then, well, how should we approach Belarus? I think there's a lot of resistance in the U.S. government because of the current government in Minsk. Thank you.
You were a one-time ambassador to Belarus.
4 months.
4 months. 4 months too long.
I was appointed by mistake, and until people realized 4 months. Yeah, but seriously, on serious note, a very complicated story. It's really using Putin's terminology, near abroad. It's very, very, very close to the capital. 40 kilometers from Vilnius, they are building nuclear power plant. What we are concerned very, very much about that. I believe it's a problem not only for us, but for the whole region, because they are doing that in violations of all norms and technical requirements. And also, let's face reality, they are integrated with Russia. It's the same country, as you know, it's a union of Russia and Belarus. They also, their security structures quite integrated, border guards, secret services. You probably know they are still called, in Russia we have FSB, but in Belarus it's still KGB, by the way. and in this KGB office, there is office of FSB, so they're also quite well coordinated. So let's face reality, let's not be naive. They are already united. And when we're talking about proximity of Russia, intentions of Russia, good illustration was last Zapad exercises where Belarus was so well integrated, so to say, by all aspects. We made some, how to say, noise or statements beforehand saying that Russians will bring some military equipment, weapon systems, and will stay. So they were withdrawn, by the way, also because probably of our vigilance. But doesn't mean a lot. They still are quite integrated. So I'm saying this, that this is really, should be perceived in the same way as it is in Russia. Everything. Maybe there are some nuances. And these nuances means that a leader of Belarus trying to withstand maybe some how to put it, some pressure, sometimes making some independent statements, but this is really not decisive. This is not something which will make a difference. And on the other hand, saying our advice will be the same as treating Russia. In principled position, very consistent. Try to help when they are trying to deliver. Example, when they had political prisoners, we all were united and say, look, it's no go. They all must be released. It was done. In my view, I was among those who said, okay, let's fix it. It was positive. Let's have more positive steps, because what we would like to see. We are not naive. We do understand that this country will not change dramatically 100% or 180 degrees and will turn out to the flourished democracy. But we really would like them not to be back to the political prisoners' time. although the pressure of civil society is quite big. And if these political people are not in prison, doesn't mean that they feel free. So our tip would be very simple. Let's be consistent. Let's talk bluntly. Let's not close eyes if they're doing something wrong. Let's fix what they're doing right. And that's the way to go, because they should be considered as integral part of Russian Federation de facto, although de jure it's a different country.
Linus, let me ask you one last question, and then we'll let you go. Yes, because we don't want to sweat too much here. This week, there's the Vostok exercise taking place. It's far away from Lithuania, obviously, but some are worried that this is a sign of Russia and China growing closer together. How do you view China's role in Europe?
China's role is important in the globe, worldwide. It's not only in Europe, it's in Africa, it's everywhere. You're talking about exercises. Of course, that scope of exercise was never ever before, 300,000. Participation of Chinese, Mongolians. They had some exercises in Baltic Sea, naval exercises, very recently. It was more just communication, maybe exercises just to test communications, not more, but nevertheless it was also signal, look, we are cooperating. We were also not very happy. But you know, these countries, in my view, they are building relations in kind of not love, but competition. And definitely also trying to withstand maybe somehow importance of other power, United States in particular, as always, because the United States was perceived always as a very friendly country in Russia, as far as I remember. Yeah, so these exercises must also message probably to United States that, look, we have friends. Many aspects could come out of that, but we have to realize that this is definitely not a confidence-building measure. If you're launching exercises that size, it's very costly, by the way. It's at the expense of the economy, which is also not flourishing, and it's demonstration of power, which is also logic because this current administration thinks that power argument, military argument works these days. So this is a message to all of us. To allow it happening, this is our fault.
Well, Linus, I know when Kurt and I saw you in Vilnius a few weeks ago, you said it would be difficult to get here to Tbilisi. We're incredibly grateful you took the time to join us today. We're very grateful for the job you do as foreign minister, and we really want to salute you. You're a public servant in the very best sense of the term. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you all.